Chapter 8 is about sustaining biodiversity and saving species. The core case study for this chapter is where have all the European honeybees gone? So honeybees provide one of the most important ecosystem services, pollination. European honeybees are used by farmers almost exclusively in the United States for pollinating crops. As you read through this chapter, you will realize that this dependence on one species is a violation of the principle of sustainability. Where have all the honeybees gone? Since 2006, the honeybees have been in a massive decline. This is called colony collapse disorder, CCD. Learn more about this disorder as you read through the case study. Think about these questions. What can we learn from their collapse, and what might happen to food supplies if the European honeybee continues to decline? Extinctions are natural, but sometimes they increase sharply. Species that can no longer be found on Earth have suffered biological extinction. Mass extinction is the extinction of many species in a relatively short period of geologic time. The Earth has had 5 mass extinctions. After each mass extinction, biodiversity returned and often was higher than before, but recovery took millions of years. A dramatic rise in the background rate of extinction will be a result of habitat loss and degradation, climate change, ocean acidification, and the impact of human activity. In the past, as humans moved across the earth, environments were destroyed, habitats were degraded, and ever larger ecological footprints were created. What do these extinction rates indicate? Well, 25 to 50% of the world's roughly 2 million identified species, as well as millions of unidentified species, could become extinct by the end of this century. This will potentially be the 6th mass extinction. We need to save species, especially keystone species, in order to reduce the human impact on biodiversity and ecosystem services. I highly recommend the book The Sixth Extinction by Elizabeth Kolbert. Projected extinction rates may be too low. Extinction rates in biodiversity hotspots are much higher than the global average. The rapidly growing human population increases per capita use of resources, which sharply increases harmful environmental impacts. We are creating a speciation crisis. Limits to long-term recovery of biodiversity may result as there are too few places for new species to evolve. Take a look at the 4 critically endangered species shown on your screen: the Mexican gray wolf, the California condor, the whooping crane, and the Sumatran tiger. Why should we try to sustain wild species and their ecosystem services? Well, many people think species have a right to exist, even if they are harmful or not useful to humans. The orangutan, a significant member of tropical forests, may soon disappear. Their forest habitats are being cleared. They bear young every 8 years, and live animals are being smuggled out of the wild for up to $10,000 each. Why should we work to prevent these kinds of extinction possibilities? Well, when one species goes extinct, this can affect many other populations. Let's try to answer the question, why should we work to prevent extinction possibilities? Well, we depend on ecosystem services for food, fuel, and lumber. Many species contribute to economic services. Discovery of medicinal drugs, for example. A great thing to keep in mind is that eliminating species that make up an essential part of the world's biodiversity is like burning millions of books that we have never read. Sharp reductions in biodiversity result in the reduction of speciation. There are many threats to both species and ecosystem services. Take a look at the infographic on your screen. It illustrates a few of the examples of threats. Loss of habitat is the single greatest threat to species. There's a great acronym to help you remember. HIPPCO. Let's start with H. H is for habitat destruction, degradation, and fragmentation. It is the greatest threat to species. I is for invasive, non-native species. P is for population growth and increasing use of resources. The next P represents pollution. C is for climate change, and O is for overexploitation. Take a look at the case study, A Disturbing Message from the Birds. Most of the world's known bird species are declining due to human activities. Remember, birds are indicator species because they live in every climate and biome. They respond quickly to environmental changes and are relatively easy to track and count. They perform critical economic and ecosystem services. They provide free pollination and seed dispersal. How can we sustain wild species and the ecosystem services they provide? Well, we can enact and enforce national environmental laws and international treaties, and we can create wildlife sanctuaries. The 1975 Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species, also known as CITES, is a treaty that was signed by 178 countries that bans hunting, capturing, and selling of threatened and endangered species. Enforcement varies from country to country, and countries can exempt themselves from a particular species. Much of the hunting takes place in countries that did not sign the treaty. The Convention on Biological Diversity, or CBD treaty, was signed by 193 countries, but as of May 2021, the United States had not signed it. CBD commits to reducing biodiversity loss and sharing the world's genetic resources. It includes efforts to control and prevent the spread of invader species, and it focuses on ecosystems, not individual species. We can establish wildlife refuges and other protected areas. The National Wildlife Refuge System was established by President Theodore Roosevelt, and by 2013 there were more than 560 refuges in the system. Wetlands are protected in 3/4 of these refuges, and this protects waterfowl migration. At least 1/4 of all U.S. endangered and threatened species have habitats in these wildlife refuges. The first U.S. federal wildlife refuge was established at Pelican Island, Florida. Unfortunately, activities harmful to wildlife, mining, oil drilling, use of off-road vehicles occur in nearly 60% of these wildlife refuges. Let me know if you have any questions from this chapter.